Senator Thomas, if you'll let us know when you're ready, then you're ready. All right, this is the live microphone, so you're welcome to present from either place. Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I certainly appreciate and I thank you so much for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 248 to you today, hoping and prayerfully that you would favorably do pass this bill out of committee. This is a bill for the deafblind, Mr. Chairman and committee members. The deafblind community crafted this legislation. They came to me with it. They worked with Legislative Council. And, Mr. Chairman, for some, it's to see the invisible, and for others, is to hear the unspoken. It's just some services that are not being provided now within the Rehabilitation Division of Services for the Department of Labor, that some of the things that's in the bill are not being provided as Braille, sign language, transportation, and what have you. There's no fiscal impact to this bill because it's depending upon the contingency of the funds that we may have available in the future. And I think that at this time, I will yield and let those who wanted to speak on this bill speak on it, and then I'll come back, Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the committee.
That's fine with me, and we'll let the committee members ask questions. Taryn Treat with the Georgia Department of Labor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Taryn Trent with the Georgia Department of Labor, and I just wanted to speak briefly on the bill. I just wanted to let the committee know that we appreciate the opportunity to work with Senator Thomas on this bill. The services provided that would be provided through this bill are services that we had not in the Department of Labor been able to provide within the mandate of the federal funding that we currently have for vocational rehabilitation. We've been working under federal fund mandate that requires us to use those funds to directly put people with disabilities back to work. And the services in this bill kind of fall outside that and fall into the independent services realm. But we have been working diligently to the best of our ability and to the greatest extent that we can to work with the deafblind community within the funding and the kinds of staff that we have. Some of the things that we've been able to do within the past couple years, when we really started to emphasize it within the past couple of years, we hired a statewide coordinator to deal with deafblind issues in the Division of Rehabilitation Services. We've been training our staff to work with deafblind individuals specifically. We do, as a standard practice, provide counseling and assessment to persons who are deaf and blind to get them back into the workplace. And we have also recently, I believe last summer, conducted a workshop on interpreting for the deafblind. So the Commissioner has been committed to this, to people with this kind of combination of disabilities, and we've been working to the greatest extent that we can to help them, and appreciate this opportunity to work with Senator Thomas and the advocates upon funds being appropriated for this purpose to help these people acquire a different level of services, that being independent living services. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Representative Jennings?
Just out of curiosity, I'd like to know where any physical facilities are for serving deafblind persons.
We would serve them in any of our vocational rehab centers throughout the state for general purposes, helping to put them back to work. We also worked with the various independent living centers. I also have with me Susan Sherman, who is our Assistant Director of Vocational Rehabilitation Programs, who can give you some information about some of the specific things that we do and specific places that we would serve them, if you'd like to hear from her.
Representative, if you would bring her, that'd be wonderful.
She's
if you'd allow her to speak.
Here.
Hi, I'm Susan Sherman, and I work as the Assistant Director with the Department of Labor's Vocational Rehabilitation Program. And to more specifically answer your question, we do have 53 offices throughout the state that serve individuals with disabilities for vocational rehabilitation purposes. We also have contracts with the Center for Visually Impaired. We have contracts with the Savannah Association for the Blind, provide some funding for the Older Blind Independent Living Program, Georgia Radio Reading Services, and Georgia Council for the Hearing Impaired.
Representative Jennings.
I have been at the Alabama School for the Deaf and Blind, and so I had some familiarity with production facilities and so forth. Do you have production facilities for deaf-blind folk?
Vocational rehabilitation does not sponsor extended shelter employment programs. Some community facilities do have contract work, but vocational rehabilitation with our state federal match does not fund that.
Thank you.
Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I just simply wanted to say that the Department of Labor does a great job working with our rehabilitation folks, and I want to commend Senator Thomas for bringing this bill to us, and at the proper time I'd like to make a motion.
We've got a few others sign up to speak. Susan Lasik.
Thank you. I brought some handouts if you'd like to see them.
Sure. Thank you.
I work for the Helen Keller National Center, and we serve specifically people with hearing and vision impairments. In the past, I've recently been promoted. I worked in Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. And it came to my attention that as vocational rehabilitation strived to serve individuals with both hearing and vision loss, we not only did not have the expertise, we did not have the resources, and we do not have the places and the personnel that know how to work with the population. And we tried very hard, and they are very open to learning, but there was just because the disability is very complex and it takes a number of years for people to really get on board and understand what goes into that. We've worked together to try to identify what would work. We started out through working together with the it's really called the Statewide Specialized Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired Coalition, and they may have changed their name a couple times between when we first started. And they were working on what issues for the blind, and we would harp, well, what about deaf-blind? And so that's what you will find in your packet is where this started in the year 2000. To answer the question about, we do not in Georgia have a residential facility that specifically can serve deaf-blind. We do have one that serves the deaf in Cave Springs, Rome area. And we have Warm Springs that does not really serve sensory disability. The vendors that we have throughout the state do not have residential facilities. So I was looking around and I thought, what can we do as a community? We understand the needs, we can identify them. It looks to me the only way we can do this is to set forth a bill that will do the right thing and put in some real substantial services that will not only help the deaf-blind, but the blind and the deaf. I also will call your attention, I think it's the next to last page in your packet. In Decatur last month, there was a conference brought by San Diego State, Helen Keller National Center, and Mississippi State. And it was on elderly people who had both hearing and vision loss. And these statistics were run based on the 2000 census. And we look around and we say this year, people with both hearing and vision loss, there are 30,540. I believe if you ask vocational rehab, which is charged to get people back to work, and oftentimes people who have both losses do not have the goal to go back to work, although many of them do. where are they? No one's counting. None of the departments and divisions have a systemic way to identify people and to also count them. So this is where the bill came from, and if I can answer any of your questions, I'll be glad to.
Any questions of the committee members? Thank you.
Thank you.
Alice Turner. Whatever's better for you.
I'm going to go ahead and speak for her. Now, I'm going to tell you that I'm deaf-blind. Now, a long time ago, I worked, and I stopped working. I had children. I had a son. He went off into the world, and then I was alone with my husband, and my husband died 2 years ago, or 2 months ago, and I was, it's been hard for me. I was taking care of him. I was doing the food and doing everything for him, and actually he died 6 weeks ago. I had him in the hospital, and there have been a lot of changes in my life, and I'm looking forward to having my best years. And I want to be around deaf-blind people, and I want to find other deaf-blind people. And it's difficult to get to work and training, and it's very important for us to depend on people who have this kind of training, but we want to be independent and live independent lives.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Sylvia Hatnich?
Where do you want me to stand?
Whatever's best for you. I think the committee's pretty light today. The room is light, so we can. You can.
I'll stand here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
My name is Sylvia Hatchett. My husband had Usher syndrome. Usher syndrome means tunnel vision, or being legally blind. He was trained in New York, and he stayed there for about 8 months, and he didn't want to stay there. He wanted to leave and come home. He wanted his own place. He wanted to be here in Georgia. Now that my husband is in heaven, I promise him that I will continue with helping in the deaf-blind community, finding facilities and helping Alice. And now that her husband is gone, I have allowed her to move into my home because she needs to have a place to go, somewhere that's dependable. But we need a place for independent living. We need SSP training. And SSP training is for people to help lead the deaf-blind and help them to make their way around, and they can work. And at home, they're independent. Please help them pass this bill. It's very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rick Hudson. Dr. Hudson, I need you to take it.
Hello, my name is Dr. Rick Hudson. I am a physician in Atlanta. I've been practicing for 20 years. I started signing in the year 2000, and I'm currently the only doctor in the state of Georgia that signs. My experience is one where I have a very large population of deaf patients, and I have a very large population of deaf-blind patients. I left work early to come here to show my support for this bill. There's a big problem in the state of Georgia. We are paying a lot of money for a lot of people to sit at home and not work. When you are deaf-blind, you are lumped currently either with blind folks or deaf folks. And you can see with Miss Alice Turner, you cannot communicate with her like other people who are just deaf or blind. Deafblind is its own entity. It is not a conglomeration of two separate disabilities. The groups of people who are deafblind have their own needs. Very easily, with a small amount of money, we could train the deafblind people in the state of Georgia and get them back to work. We are paying Medicaid benefits for them. The state of Georgia currently is spending a lot of money, and we're not getting very much for it. Doctors are not identifying deafblind. That's one of my biggest issues. If you have a deaf problem, you go to an ears, nose, and throat doctor, and they take care of your ears. You go to an ophthalmologist, and they will take care of your sight. Nobody takes care of the person who has both deaf blindness. We have a huge hole, a gap with this group of people. The state of Georgia is spending a lot of money currently, and we're not helping a lot of these folks. I am identifying deafblind folks every week. They don't even know that they are deafblind. They're deaf. I may sign to them. They have a vision problem. But nobody connects the fact that they have both deaf blindness as an issue. So this bill will help educate a bunch of some people who will then be able to communicate effectively and to get the tools needed for these deafblind folks to get back to work and stop being a drain on the state of Georgia. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions of the committee members? I do have one question just for general knowledge. Signing and the learning to sign, how long does it typically take somebody to become proficient in that?
It takes a while. I am not proficient. I am not an interpreter. I sign. It took me around 4 years to be able to effectively communicate with my patients. The interpreters that you see here have much more training and probably, well, they'll be better able to answer that, probably 5 to 6 years. It's a lot of work to learn how to sign, and that's where part of the problem is. You go to vocational rehab, how do you communicate with somebody like Alice? You can have the next person who may have a cochlear implant and is blind. Well, you can talk very loudly in that person's ear, and that person can communicate. Some people have some vision that you can sign from me to you as long as you sign right in front of them. So just because you're deaf-blind, that does not mean anything, because the communication patterns are so different, as you can see right now.
If I could ask the interpreter, the ones who, is there a difference in signing for people who are both deaf-blind and people who are deaf?
Hi, my name is Nashonda Burke. Your question, is there a difference between signing with deaf-blind and just deaf?
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, you stand at a distance from the lady that you're assisting, and she communicates physically. I guess my question is, does your training intermingle? I mean,
Specifically, if you interpret for deaf-blind, you have to have special training in that, which is tactile signing, which means touch signing. It is more strenuous, more tedious, because it's more tiresome, because the deaf person is leaning and depending on you to get the communication through. There are special workshops and classes that you take during your interpreting training for that, and you also have to decide if that's an area that you want to venture into.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any questions of the committee members?
I'd like to answer that if I may.
Okay.
people come to hearing and vision loss in a different way. You can be born into it, you can be blind and lose your hearing, you can be deaf and lose your vision, or you could be born hearing sighted and later lose both. So depending on how you came to it, that's going to be your communication mode. Someone who's blind and loses their hearing can still speak for themselves, and that's their expressive mode. When it comes to receiving them, if amplification works in a silent room, that's a good thing. But if you're in a noisy restaurant, or there's background noise, or you don't have a hearing aid or any amplification, you may not be able to hear at all. So there's a wide spectrum of people that we in services call deaf-blind, but it's not always a person who's totally deaf and totally blind, as you see Ms. Turner is today. Does that help? So some of the training for the person may help them get a new receptive way of communicating if they no longer can hear even with amplification, or a new way of expressing themselves if they need that. And it also would include Braille, and then they can use the computer with Braille output.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the committee? Representative Jennings?
Really not a question so much as to appreciate the advocates. Excuse me, we have present with us today. I have a relative who was an employee of the Alabama School for Deaf and Blind with a campus in Talladega, and he happened to have been in charge of the manufacturing area, and they made millions of ties for military, among other things, canvas bags, and I was told that these kinds of activities were very rewarding for these people because, excuse me, they were contributing, not merely receiving support, and they seemed happy in their work as I was able to see it. I'll also mention that in my district, DeKalb County Briar Lake Elementary School has hearing impaired children from around DeKalb County attending and going to classes with hearing students, have an active signing choir so that the hearing excuse me, the hearing students come to appreciate that these people just have an impairment, but they're not different from them. They get along well together, and I think it's a very good program that I'm pleased about, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you for those comments. Tom Gailey, if you don't mind, would like to speak. He is the executive director at a nonprofit organization that does advocacy for consumers who are deaf, hard of hearing, and latent deaf in the state of Georgia.
That's fine, thank you.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm Tom Gailey, and I am the executive director for the Georgia Council for Hearing Impaired here in the state of Georgia. We have 5 offices throughout Georgia, and I wanted to inform you that a lot of people throughout the state, it's very important for those people, and that also includes deaf blind. The most common concerns that they have, or that they have shared with us, they feel that their needs are not being met. Not now, not here in the state of Georgia. GOTI provides advocacy. We provide information referral services. We also provide independent living and training when we can. We provide a few other services as well. And again, many of the deaf blind people come to us and they ask us for those services. Well, let's say 4 of our offices, one is in Rome, one is in Macon, Columbus, and the other one is in Decatur, Georgia, throughout the state of Georgia, 5 offices. There are 4 other offices in the rural areas where the people come and they get our services. And we try to abide those services. And again, we really need services for the deaf blind. They have asked continuously about specific services for their needs.
on behalf of the deaf schools and the community, we ask for your full support for the Bill 248. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
If you have any questions for me, I will be happy to answer.
Any questions from members of the committee? Anybody else that would like to speak in favor of 248? Senator Thomas?
Thank you, Mr.
if
Chairman.
you would, if you'd like
I
to wrap
certainly
up for us.
appreciate you and the committee members, and the only thing that I need to say now is that this population, the community of the deafblind, can just sit home and do nothing, but they want to be as independent as possible, and Senate Bill 248 will give them that opportunity. I certainly thank you and hope that you will favorably pass Senate Bill 248 out of committee.
If the lady from the Department of Labor, I would like for, I don't want to put any amendments into the legislation, but I would like for you to keep us in the legislature apprised of the progress on this. Once funding comes, we would, as the legislature, like to know that those funds are being put to use, and I'm sure.
We certainly will, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Jennings?
If it's appropriate, I'd like to do pass.
Mr. Jennings, I think that's a very appropriate motion on Senate Bill 248. Bill has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much.
Senator Kemp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, that's certainly a hard act to follow. I rise today to bring you Senate Bill 450. I appreciate the opportunity to appear and present this to the committee. I'm bringing this on behalf of the County Officers Association of Georgia, who has been working with many people, including ACCG, for the last couple of years to put this bill together and try to get everybody on board with what we're trying to do. It did pass the Senate on a unanimous bipartisan vote of 50 to nothing. Basically, what Senate Bill 450 does is it merges and unifies the three minimum salaries for the probate judges, clerks of Superior Court, tax commissioners into one common amount for each population bracket. The salary that is the highest for a given population bracket amongst the three will now be the salary for all three officials. And it's important to note, since these are state constitutional officers, that the legislature must set the minimum salaries, and this is something that's been done for years. The second thing it does, it recalculates the minimum salaries for sheriffs, tax commissioners, clerk of courts, judges of probate court, to be reflective of the cost of living adjustments, COLAs, that had been given through January 2006. And then this total is adjusted by a 2.5% raise. So basically there's been cost of living adjustments for the last 4 years, or over the last 4 years, but no pay raise for these folks. The third thing, it provides for a longevity pay increase for county commissioners, a 5% increase for each 4-year term they serve, and that's after December 31st, 2004. So it's not going to go back and be retroactive for somebody that's been in office for 15 or 20 years or so. Number 4, the legislation provides for a recalculation of minimum salaries. This just sets a minimum salary, so if there's a local delegation or that wants to have their officials paid more, they can certainly do that. It sets minimum salaries for any year in which the Department of Community Affairs publishes a census estimate for that county that is higher than the preceding decimal census. What this does is it allows counties that are in real fast-growing areas to adjust a little quicker than waiting every 10 years as these elected officials are having to deal with more of a workload. There's a concern that they need to be compensated for that. And then the fifth thing is I think I said this earlier, but the sheriff's, tax commissioners, clerk of courts, or the probate judge have not received a salary increase in 5 years. And one other point I'd like to make, and then I can answer any specific questions that you have about the bill. I didn't want to take the time to go through every section because I know y'all probably looked at this, but from a legislator's standpoint, I think it's a good thing because everybody's going to be on the same plane now. You're not going to have to be leapfrogging every year with either the tax commissioner or somebody else coming saying we want a raise and having to deal with somebody else the next year. They'll all be dealt with in the future at the same time, and it'll make it a little bit easier on the legislators. But I'd like to ask for your support. I think ACCG, who's supporting the bill, has got a couple of amendments that they want to speak to. Evidently, there's a few counties in the state, or only a few, but there's one that has a 2-year term for their county commissioners, and there's one or two that actually has 6-year terms. So we've had to make a little amendment on the cost of living or the longevity pay increase for county commissioners, and I'll let ACCG speak to that. I think the chairman's aware of that amendment. But with that, I'd like to ask for your support and be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Senator Kemp, I think, any questions of the committee members? Representative Oliver, what number? Representative Oliver.
Is that covered by Section 9? Tell me where that is. Are you giving them an automatic 5% increase every year?
No, ma'am. They get, for every 4-year term they serve, they'd get a 5% longevity increase.
If the
So it'd be a little over 1% a year.
Okay, so if just for example, DeKalb County said no raises this year for any employees, this statute would override it and give the county commissions a 1% increase.
That would be my understanding, yes, ma'am.
And in relation to the supplemental salaries that my county pays, the supplemental salary is going to be in addition to this $13,000 raise that you're giving the tax commissioner and the clerk and all those people in DeKalb County. I'm reading that correctly?
Yes, ma'am. This is minimum salaries, and I would. One of the things when I first saw this bill that concerned me a little bit was the amount of some of the jumps. But I think you have to understand that in the legislation, this is including the cost of living increases that have already been given the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they're getting all this 1 year. Some of this money's they're already getting now.
But DeKalb County, when you put in the cost of living in terms of the supplement salaries, it's just much bigger increase for the bigger counties.
Could be. This is just dealing with the minimum salary.
Representative Oliver, if I understood your question, this would not, if somebody is paying a supplement, it doesn't mandate that they increase their pay as long as their current pay is above what the new minimum scale is going to be. Isn't that accurate?
Well, let's clarify this, because I read it. If the DeKalb County Sheriff's making $110,000, and this calls for, well, does it? It looks to me like the DeKalb County Sheriff is going to get a $13,000 increase.
I don't think the pay raise is affecting the sheriffs.
Or
That's right.
Or if he reaches a new population bracket. If the sheriff reaches.
DeKalb and Fulton are over 500,000.
Okay,
So
then there is
that's
no
where I'm
population bracket.
focused my attention.
Okay.
And it looks to me like this DeKalb supplemental salary of whatever it is for the sheriff, let's say it's $20,000. Then now, instead of 96 plus 20, he's going to get 109 plus 20. And that's how I read it. Am I correct?
Right. Well, his minimum salary is going to go up.
And the supplement's going to be the same on top of that.
That would be my understanding. Somebody else may can answer that.
Could the county reduce the supplement if they chose to?
No, not without statute. They'd have to do it by local statute. So those of us that didn't think this was affecting us, it really is affecting us.
Can I speak?
Any other questions for Senator Kemp? Senator Kemp, we'll call you back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Steve Wilson. I'll let.
Mr. Chairman, can Andy Pipkin, who is tax
Certainly.
commissioner, could I ask him to clarify that?
Certainly.
Okay.
I think the question was if they're on a local bill and they get these raises, they have to choose one or the other. They can't take the best of each bill. So if you're on the local bill, you get what the local bill is. If this passes the local bill, then they would get this, the minimum salary.
I don't think that's accurate. I want somebody to explain it to me, because we have a special local legislation that gives the Superior Court judges and all this training with an X amount of supplements. And I'm reading this, that the supplement's going to be on top of the $13,000 raise that my folks are getting here. I just want to know if I'm reading it correctly.
I get the supplement in Henry County, and I'm on the minimum salary bill for tax commissioners, and so I get that, and then after they have figured that, they add my supplement to it. Now, a lot of people are on a local bill, and I talked to Tom Scott today, and I think Tom said he thinks they're on a local bill now instead of minimum salary. Tom and I talked on the phone when I was coming up here today. So if they're on local, this wouldn't affect them. But if they're not on, if they're on minimum, then they would get this, plus they would get that supplement. The question is, are they on local or are they on the minimum salary bill for the state? Do you see what I'm trying to say? And Tom thought that they were on a local bill, but I can't answer that. Nobody could except someone from DeKalb County.
If you've got a state law, essentially local legislation granting a $15,000 supplement, then that's going to be in addition to the numbers that are prescribed in this bill.
That's correct.
But
I don't know if they're going to get the numbers in this bill if they're on a local bill.
Well, I think the issue is whether or not it's a local supplemental bill or a local bill that sets the salary.
That's right.
This is a local.
In DeKalb County, all the local legislation is supplemental salaries on top of the amendments. Am I correct about that, Mr. County Commissioner, lawyer back there?
I don't know the answer to that. I can find that out for you, Representative, but my understanding is it's separate. And Mr. Grubeck can probably answer that better than I can.
I believe I can. I can't speak specifically to any one given county, but the general concept is this. Either a county officer is paid either under the minimum salary statute, which is what you're addressing right now. That's the minimum for all county officers in the state. However, if local legislation, however it's put together, results in compensation that would provide that county officer more than the minimum, that's what that county officer gets. What this bill is doing is adjusting the minimum. So the minimum for everybody is going up. It's conceivable that the minimum could pass some compensation that is already being provided to a county officer under local legislation, because now it's greater than what the local legislation provides, in which case the minimum, as the name implies, would then prevail. So you have to really look at each and every county to determine if there's any impact at all. Most of the larger urban counties, the compensation comes through local legislation that establishes the salary, the compensation for the county officers. There are a number of counties where the county commissioners, and this law allows for the commissioners to also supplement the compensation of the county officers. So that's another issue that you'd have to look at. But again, those are all local. That's a local provision that may or may not affect whether or not this is going to result in higher compensation for any given county official. Does that help clarify it at all?
I think it results in the amount of the difference between the prior amendment and the existing proposed amendment. I think that's how much of a salary increase my folks get in this.
Well, what you would look at is, let's just say that the sheriff is making $150,000 right now. I don't know what it is. Let's say it's $150,000. This might increase. This increases the minimum base salary to for $109,000. That's going to be the minimum base. And then there'll be supplements for serving in the various courts and so on. All that you'd have to compare to what he's actually getting. If it does not result in a figure that's greater than what he's already getting, then the salary's not going to go up. That's the general concept that this all revolves around.
Mr. Grubiak.
Yes, sir.
Can you had signed up to speak? Do you want to go ahead and speak? Was he done? I'm sorry.
Steve never spoke.
Okay.
Never did.
Let's bring Sheriff Wilson back.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members, thank you for allowing me to speak. I am Steve Wilson. I'm the sheriff in Walker County up in the northern part of the state. And this year, 2006, I'm serving as president of the County Officers Association of Georgia. And I believe everyone knows what our organization is about. We're about the 4 constitutional officers, the probate judge, the clerk, the tax commissioner, and the sheriff. And I think we've been around since about the mid-'80s as COAG, as we refer to ourselves. The minimum salary bill, SB 450, that you have before you, has been the result of a lot of work by a lot of people over the last couple of years to define it and work it and retool it and to get it to where we are today. And I know there probably are questions that you have, and I know that all of us here will do our best to answer those questions for you as the best of our ability. We would ask that you favorably consider it and look at it and remember those county officers back in the counties across the state of Georgia.
Any questions of the committee for Sheriff Walker? I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
And I don't think it's any secret that I've had serious concerns about this legislation since I first heard about it. And as I look over the list, and in populations of 0 to 6,000, you've got the clerk made the most. 6 to 11.8, approximately. The clerk, 11 to 19, the clerk, 20 to 28, the clerk, 29 to 38, or 39, the clerk, 39 to 49, the clerk, 50 to 75, the tax commissioner, 75 to 99, the tax commissioner, 100 to 149, the tax commissioner. And as I go through here, here's in one county, the probate judge made the most. And it seems to me that if we were being fair, we would have taken the average of the 3. And what's been done is, the way the bill is drafted, you've taken the highest of any given one, and it's resulted in and my information comes from the Constitutional Officers Association, areas where you might have a $19,000 pay raise. If you're in a 200 to 250,000 person community, your clerk is going to get a $19,000 pay raise. In addition to that, and this is spelled out in the bill, members of the committee, there's an additional cost of living adjustment over and above the numbers that are shown in the bill that would give the cost of living adjustment that we grant to state employees in the current state budget. How does somebody explain to their constituents that they voted to give an elected official a pay raise equivalent to what the average Georgia citizen makes?
Well, let me try to answer that because that was a long question, and I'll try to back up and remember everything there.
Well, let me say this. The average Georgia citizen makes just over $20,000. Some people, if this bill passes, will get a pay raise that exceeds $20,000. How do we as the General Assembly explain to our constituents why we passed a pay raise for an elected official that the raise exceeds what the average citizen, or certainly approaches what the average citizen makes? Could you identify which area you're saying gets a $20,000 raise? Then let me answer that. In counties of 200,000 to 249,999, the clerk is moving from 64,000 to 84,000. That's a $19,779 change. In addition to that, they will get the cost of living adjustment that the state passes for the state employees this year, and that cost of living adjustment will be based on the whole 84,000.
The 2% raise on January the 1st is already in there.
That's right.
It's already in column 3 that I have. I'm not sure what column you have.
But the second pay raise is not. And the second pay raise would be the cost of living adjustment that we give the state employees. And that's not reflected in the numbers in the bill.
The way I understand the bill, Mr. Chairman, is that 2.5% is already in here and would go into effect January 1 of 2007, the way I understand it. Now, if I'm wrong, somebody could speak up and correct me. I think I'm correct in that it's already in this figure.
But Section 12 reads, "It is the intent of the General Assembly that for those county officials whose minimum salaries are increased by operation of law, when the General Assembly authorizes a cost of living increase or general performance-based increase for the employees in the classified service of the state merit system, any such increase authorized by the General Assembly in the fiscal year 2007 Appropriations Act shall be in addition to the minimum salaries of such officials that become effective on January 1, 2007 under the provisions of this Act." So in addition to the numbers in this bill, the cost of living adjustment that we give state employees in the current budget would go on top of the numbers that we see here. Isn't that correct?
That's not my understanding of the bill, no, sir. Now, the COLAs have, what we have to look at this here is we have to look at the COLAs. The last time the code section was written as to county officers was about 2000, I believe. And every year when those COLAs are added, the code section does not change. And that's why you're seeing a large jump. You're looking at 5 years worth of COLAs to bring us up to this point. But I don't understand the bill that way, and I don't think the bill's intended to be that way. And certainly it could be amended to reflect anything that you so desired. It's my understanding that this would be voted on with this 2.5% raise that would take effect 1/1/07. That's the way I understand the bill. Can anyone clarify that for me if I'm mistaken?
It's my understanding that everything that I've talked about, the COLAs and the pay raise, would be included in these figures that are in the bill. And this Section 12 would be next year if the legislature decides to come back and then add another raise or another cost of living increase, it'll be on top of that. That's my understanding. I may be wrong, but
That's the way I understand it too, Mr. Chairman. Only if they're on the minimum, the way I understand it,
But
Madam.
if the date is changed to 2008, then you know the way I read it is it says act in addition to the minimum salaries of such officials that become effective.
Maybe that should read 2008. Maybe that should read that way, Mr. Chairman. Because the way I understand it, everything would be included in the language that's already there.
Representative Jennings.
You have a second committee member from DeKalb County, and I don't feel comfortable voting on this without knowing how it affects the elected people from my county, as Representative Oliver has mentioned. I don't feel good about voting this when we don't have definitive information about what the total salary will be for these officers.
Representative O'Neill.
In each county are we talking about here? I mean, I've got only one sheriff in my
We're talking about the 4 constitutional officers, and the sheriff in this bill would receive a 2.5% raise in January, and that's all the sheriff would raise. It doesn't affect the sheriff's scale except for that 2.5% raise. Your probate judge, your tax commissioner, and your clerk of court would be unified, as Senator Kemp said. Those 3 would be unified, and the sheriff would receive the 2.5% on the minimum.
Wait a minute. Now, tell me, in Section 6, then, is that not sheriffs there? It looks to me like it says
But that's the
sheriff.
past COLAs that we already have that were not in the law. See, the law, the last time the law was written was in 2000. And every year when the state system, such as teachers, gets a cost of living raise, all 4 of these groups of people gets the same raise currently. And so you have to go back every 5, 6, 7, 10 years, and you have to amend the code because those COLAs have taken away from it. So what you're looking at here, the sheriff is only 2.5%. The COLAs have been in there for the last 5 years, and it does not reflect that in the code, or 6 years maybe. So that's why it's a little deceiving, because the COLAs that we get every year, and one year we didn't get a COLA. Whatever year it was, we didn't get one, and y'all would remember that. Was it 2 years ago? I believe no state employees got a COLA. So that's why sometimes it looks like it's a bigger jump than what it is, but in reality it's not, because those COLAs have taken effect each year.
I want to finish.
Chairman O'Neill,
is it just 4 people per county we're talking about here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's
it's not a whole great.
No, it's just the 4 constitutional officers in each county.
And am I going to hear later that the ACC, this is what the counties want to do? I mean, they want us to do this?
ACCG, we have Jim Grubiak here, who is in, and ACCG has signed off on this. As he said, there's a couple of other areas of the bill that he talked about. Senator Kemp talked about the decimal census. If a county jumped a bracket, then that county officer, one of these 4 county officers, would be able to jump that bracket. Let's say in a fast-growing county, if that county grew and passed the bracket in the first 2 years, first 3 years, we would look at DCA estimates that are published for the previous year, and we would not have to wait till 10 years down the road. And then also, as Mr. Grubiak reflected, ACCG has proposed in this bill that county commissioners who are reelected after that 4-year term would receive a 5% longevity raise, as all other of these 4 officers do now.
Last question. Do the commissioners have to rely on us to set their pay?
Yes, sir. That's my understanding that the state has to set the commissioner's raise salary.
Jim says no, I don't know.
It's a combination. I know in my county, local legislation has to be set for I have a sole commissioner, and the sole commissioner's salary is set by the General Assembly through local legislation.
Chairman O'Neill, Representative Jennings was next.
Do I understand what you told to Chairman O'Neill? For example, in the sheriff's salary, and going all the way down to the bottom, where it shows $114,000, then in fact, that's where the salaries are, minimum salary is right now based on COLAs. Is that what you?
Yes, sir. If you look at, we're on page 8. We're on page 8. If you look at the bottom,
I was looking at page 7 where the sheriffs are.
Okay, if you go
500,000 or more, it says 114,040.36.
That's the minimum. The minimum now is 101,048.91 current, and if you add 2.5% to that, it would make it 114,040.36. Any sheriff that serves in a county with 500,000 or more people right now would make $101,048.91 currently.
Actually,
2.5% would not take it up to 100.
Plus the COLAs.
Plus, he's not making 101 now. He's making about 110 or 12.
Yeah, and plus you have to add the COLAs to that, so he's actually making more than that.
He's making, if I understand correctly, Representative Jennings, and I have a few numbers that I wish I had made copies of for the committee. That current sheriff in a county of 500,000 and up, the 101,048.91 was that person's salary, probably in the year 2000, based on
that's correct.
Language. The cost of living adjustments that sheriff has currently had to date would bring that salary to 109,425. I'm sorry, 114. I apologize.
109.
Tax commissioners. The sheriff is currently making 111,259.13. He was making 101,048.91 with the cost of living adjustments. He's currently making 111,259.13, and if this bill passed, that would move to 114,040.36 plus, if it passed as is, the cost of living that we give state
2.5%
employees.
more on January 107.
Whatever we give state employees.
If this passed.
I don't think it's the intent of that bill to give another 2.5% in January, and that may need to be clarified here because I don't think that was the intent of the bill to do that.
Representative Oliver, what number are you?
I'm 24, Mr. Chairman. So tell me if I'm wrong. I think what you said is just right. If I put these your two gentlemen together, is from 2001, if you do 2.5% every year, it comes to 111,000. So what we're doing is raising the minimum salary from 111 to 114.
That's correct. You're cleaning up the COLA. You're cleaning up the law to allow for the COLAs.
Well, we're cleaning up the COLAs retroactively, and we're giving an additional $3,000.
2.5% that would take effect January the 1st of 2007. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then in addition to that, this is where I want to be clear, we're imposing an additional 2.5% plus an additional COLA that the state gives. Yes
No.
or no?
That's
No.
right.
He says yes and you say no.
The bill reads the 114,040.36 is 2.5% more than the sheriff is currently making in DeKalb County. In addition to that, if the bill passes with Section 12 as it is, that sheriff in that situation would get the state cost of living adjustment as well. That's my understanding.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, if I could, just for the record, I'm Skin Edge representing COAG. I think you're right. The bill says it takes into account all the COLAs up to date retroactively, and you have to do that periodically because when you pass it, here was the law, here was the thing, then the COLAs went into effect. So we're saying now here's the new, all the COLAs plus a 2.5% raise. If the General Assembly passes a cost of living in the budget this year, which it appears that you will, but of course at the time the bill was drawn, you didn't know if you were or you weren't, then the COLA would go into effect on top of that beginning in '07. But it would be granted this year, taking effect in '07. Now, if the committee feels like that should be put off a year, we would have no objection to that.
What my goal is, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is to retroactively adopt the COLAs at 2.5%, which I think was done by state law.
Correct.
I don't think DeKalb County had anything to do with that.
That's right.
Okay, so retroactively impose the COLAs imposed by state law, and then continue to impose a 2.5% COLA, but I don't want a double COLA.
That's what we're saying. And
this bill, the chairman thinks imposes a double COLA, and I don't have an.
And what we're saying, I think an amendment to put that to '08, I think would alleviate that problem.
You think the double COLA is only for 1 year?
Correct. Yes.
The way my study of the bill is that the double COLA is for 1 year.
And to correct that would be on page 12, line 16. Would that be corrected by changing that to 2008 instead of 2007, or is there another?
I think that would correct it.
You have to change line 15 as well. Yes, ma'am.
Render his opinion.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, when the bill was drafted, it did, that section 12 was intended to give the COLA, whatever it may be, if there is one passed by the General Assembly for state employees this year, to be on top of the salary schedule. If the committee chooses not to do that, you just need to eliminate section 12 or have section 12 say that any COLA granted during the '07 fiscal year will not apply these minimum salaries. After that, there are provisions in each one of these that pick up the COLA for the subsequent year. So there's not a need to change it to '08 because then you move a COLA, double COLA to '08, if you will. So section 12 needs to be recast if the committee does not want to adjust these schedules further, just to say that any salary COLA given in the '07 budget, state employees will not be added on to the change in the minimum salary schedule. Otherwise, there will be that adjustment that y'all been talking about. And I don't know if that helps or not.
If I may, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention because I had not caught that, and I've read it several times. I think if we look at page 8, just for example, starting on line 13, the periodic changes in the amounts fixed in the minimum salary schedule in paragraph 1 are the amounts through longevity increases, first day of January following the date cost of living increase received by state employees becomes effective. And so that covers what section 12.
In the ordinary course of business.
Right, and with section 12 in there, for each and every year going forward?
No, just for this year. It's a double for '07. Starting January 1, '07, you will apply the changes which you're making here to minimum salaries, and then there would be also whatever raise was given, percentage of raises was given state employees would be added to that for that 1 year. After that, you go back to whatever is in the law here as far as raises. So just that 1 year's effect.
If we
If you just want to stay with the minimum salary schedule, then changing section 12, just to merely say that any raises granted to employees in the '07 fiscal year budget will not be effective for these raises, and perhaps going through and changing the effective date lines in each one of these, where we changed to 2006, change, for instance, like on page 6, line 9, where it says only after July 1, 2006, change that to 2007. Then it will start picking up just regular COLAs, and the minimum salary schedule will be as stated in the law for the '07 year. Hope that's making sense. I know it's getting a bit confusing, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
would you look at how many places
Yes,
that bill would need to be amended to do that. Any other questions of the committee? Sheriff, you want to continue?
Well, as I was conferring with Mr. Pippin there, the 2.5 that was put in there was basically to take care of some of the clerks who were not getting raises, and that was the reason that was drafted and put in there, if that clarifies that in any at all. But I don't have anything else. I hope we've cleared up some of those issues, and some of the issues, I apologize, maybe I didn't understand that Section 12. It's kind of confusing when you look at all of it, and I appreciate the Legislative Council being here to maybe clear some of that up for us.
I do have one question. How many counties do we have that would actually hit the next bracket as of today, if the DCA number is allowed?
I don't have that research in front of me. I would think before we reach the 2010 census, you may be looking at, this is just a guesstimate, maybe five or six counties, and that's just a guess. Yeah, some of them are already probably, and local legislation can move them on up, and many of them do that now. But Henry moves him up without you moving us up. His local people do that for him. But some of the counties, such as Tift County, I have the Tift County probate judge here with me now, and I think your home county.
Yeah, I noticed you bring her. She's one of my favorite people, too.
So I bring her along so she can smile at you. But, now we'll go back and tell her mama on you, right?
Well, I mean, her mama pays property taxes. She might need the money worse than the judge.
That's right. But I know Tift County, as you well know, that being your home county, is growing at leaps and bounds. And this is just to take care of those counties where growth is so rapid that we don't want to keep them. I know back in the in 2000, Paulding County, for example, from the 1990 census to 2000, the constitutional officers in Paulding County jumped 2 brackets because Paulding grew so fast. But I want to say there's 5 or 6 at the most.
Let me ask you this question. Sheriff's retirement plan, for example, is that based on your final salary?
It's based on the number of years that you serve, okay. And of course we pay into it. We pay a portion of that into it, and right now it's paying about $106 per year of service, I believe.
My question was, what kind of effect would this have on any of the retirement plans that are out there fiscally? And
don't think it would have any effect on the sheriff's retirement, because the sheriff's retirement would not be tied to this because it's based on numbers of years of service.
Okay.
I can't speak for the other 3 offices.
Are all of the others based on numbers of years of services, or any of them based
They're nodding
on
their head, yes.
Final average salary?
They're nodding their head. It's based on years of service.
I have one last question. Do you have a total cost of what the bill would be?
I believe, Skin, you've shared some of those figures. I don't, and Bob Carter had to leave a little early.
We have an average cost per county, Mr. Chairman.
What is that average cost per county?
Well, if you take all the salaries and consolidate them, it was a little less than $14,000 a year, so it's about $3,500 per county officer. I probably should have given y'all that figure to start with, because it puts it a little bit more in perspective when you look at the numbers that are in the bill versus what the real cost is on a yearly figure.
I mean, I came up with close to $2 million, assuming that nobody jumped brackets.
But, we want to make it clear that this is not state funded. It's funded by each local county. And I think the average is about $14,000 or $15,000 per county. Of course, there's 159 counties in the state.
Any questions of the committee?
Jim?
Jim Grubiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. I do want to express the Association of County Commissioners' support for this legislation. Our board did unanimously endorse the legislation, and we do it for a couple of reasons. One is we do have a dedicated group of elected officials, county officials throughout the state, and we think that should be recognized and should be encouraged to continue to run for office. I think this helps in that regard. There's also an administrative component to it. Each year we prepare manual. It looks like this on how to calculate salaries. It's a task for your county clerks to prepare the actual amounts, and this will help by rolling those COLAs, those already granted COLAs, into a new base. That's one of the real benefits to the bill. There were two amendments that I wanted to ask you to consider, both technical. One has to do with that provision that's in each of these county officers' sections that talks about the census, using the DCA census numbers. I would just like to be able to tie that to a specific date so that we can prepare this manual and know what the figure is. July 1st is what I would suggest of each year. And I have an amendment that I'd like to ask you to take a look at. And the second amendment has to do with the longevity provision for the commissioners. It is a 5% longevity for those who get reelected. This is the same longevity provision that the sheriffs, probate judges, clerks, and tax commissioners already receive if they're reelected. It's been in place since 1976 or 78 for the county officers. This is a tradition that goes way back. This would apply to commissioners going forward, or those who are in office right now if they get reelected. To put that in perspective, we have 50% of our commissioners do not get reelected every 4 years, so there's not a lot of longevity for county commissioners, so it will not add up to a lot, we don't think. The amendment has to do with the fact that the Section 9 says that this applies to each 4-year term of office. It so happens we have 3 counties that don't have 4-year terms of office. We have 1 county with 2-year terms of office, and we have 2 counties with 6-year terms of office. So just to make it make sense, it's just kind of divided it up, 2.5% for the 2-year terms and 7.5% for the 6-year terms. So it comes out the same in the long run. So those would be the 2 amendments that I would recommend and ask you to make to the bill. Any questions? I'd be glad to.
Any questions, Mr. Grubiak? Members of the committee? I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Since I've been in the General Assembly, 10 years, the county commissioners, to my recollection, have opposed every pay raise that was state mandated for anybody that got paid out of the county coffers, whether it be judges or sheriffs or coroners or clerks. I can't recall one that has been supported by the ACCG. Can you tell me of another one that the ACCG has supported?
Oh, yes, sir. Actually, you do go way back, as you know, and there was a time when we did oppose every single compensation bill for the sheriffs, clerks, and the others. That was leading to so much conflict at the local level. This minimum salary scheme was created, this procedure was created, so there wouldn't have to be a salary bill for each of the county officers every year. So this COLA idea was developed so that in years when the state's doing well and you all grant the state employees a COLA, the assumption is that the county's generally going to be doing about in the same posture. So if state employees can you can justify 2% COLA in a given year, then the assumption is that the counties can afford a 2% COLA for the sheriffs, the probate judges, clerks, and tax commissioners. So it has, by the way, varied each year. It's not always the same. It's been 1%, 1.75%, it's been 0%, and so on. It varies depending on what you all do up here. And we supported that when it was first created, and in the year 2000, the last time, we did something similar to this, where the COLAs were rolled into a new base, and I think there was a raise there was a 10%. There was a 10% raise in 2000, and we supported that. So we think it's important that the commissioners, the county officers, have a good working relationship. We think the salary conflicts were leading to lots and lots of bickering and complaints and infighting within the courthouses that didn't make any sense and wasn't justified in terms of the public. The salary legislation, the minimum salary statute, has helped to resolve lots and lots of those problems. Everything's not peachy keen in all areas, in all instances, but the relationship between the county officials inside your courthouse has improved dramatically statewide since we started to do this compensation approach. So we've supported this in 2000, and we supported it when it was first created. I don't recall what year that was. So,
Chairman O'Neill, what number? 25?
25. On the commissioner's compensation,
yes, sir.
I know we're doing this longevity thing, which
yes,
is
sir.
not really setting their compensation, but it
correct.
Is granting a 5% increase. They couldn't do that themselves.
There's the compensation scheme for commissioners is different for the others. There's not a minimum salary like there is for the constitutional officers. There is basically all set the base through local legislation. And commissioners, however, by going through a certain procedure, there's certain timing that has to be followed as to when they do it, they can increase their own compensation. And presumably they could put in some kind of a longevity provision. That might be kind of difficult to do at a local level when you have numerous commissioners and all in different. Some get re-elected, some don't, some run, some don't. It seemed to make more sense that be something that's done as part of a general bill rather than through local ordinances.
But they could.
But I believe they could. I've never seen any do that, but I believe they could. They certainly can establish increases in their compensation above what the basis that y'all set. And y'all, by the way, have the power to undo that as well if they go overboard. You can take it away from them. And the important aspect of that longevity provision is that, as I mentioned before, there's been an effort to try to treat everybody the same within the courthouse so that there's some petty things don't arise out of compensation issues. And so the 5% longevity for the commissioners being the same as the 5% that the sheriffs get when they get theirs, the tax commissioner and so on, it just makes for a happy family, I think is maybe the best way to put it within the courthouse. And that's really the reason. For the commissioners, the amount of money is modest because the vast majority are part-time. It's really the procedure is that being treated equitably and the same as the others that's important from our perspective.
Representative Powell.
I just can't stand it. I was going to sit here and not say anything. I got a couple of questions I want to ask just to clarify my own mind.
Yes.
So we're going to the raising the minimum salary act that goes into effect January 1st. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I've got a unique situation. I spent 16 years trying to straighten up compensation bills, and I don't think any county had anything that was uniform. And I've always liked the idea of the uniform structure. So if I'm understanding right, if this bill passes come January the 1st in those population brackets, that will be the annual salary for each of those officials.
It will be unless they're already getting paid more under local legislation.
Right.
And that would still, the local legislation would stay in effect as long as the amount as calculated is higher than what this would provide on January 1st, which is certainly conceivable.
I think we're on the same wavelength. But so we have consolidated all the past COLAs and brought
Yes,
it
sir.
up to date as of January 1st.
Yes, sir.
So then conceivably what I will have in my counties is that the sheriff will be at this plus forever how many terms he's been elected, or that they get that 5% that has already been added to on top. Terms of office.
Yeah. He'll get that in addition to that's right.
So then in a situation where I've got tax commissioners who got caught 2 years ago and turned back a pay raise, then that brings them back up to
Yes, sir.
back up to snuff. Puts my tax commissioners on the same level as the other county officers, and it just basically cleans up a situation.
It will do that. Yes, sir.
How big is your county? I think all three of my counties are the 20 to 30,000, and I want to echo some comments from the chairman. There's a lot. I think there's a lot of questions in here, but I think it's a good. Conceivably, it's a good act because tax commissioners have all. I don't know who's a tax. Well, I do. Andy's over all red-faced, but we've got a lot of tax commissioners in the state that have not always been treated up to snuff. A lot of them been treated like stepchildren, as obvious by the pay standard. I think all in all, it's a pretty acceptable bill.
Thanks, sir.
Any other questions of the committee for Mr. Kubiak?
Yes, sir.
This is just a curiosity.
Yes, sir.
The disparity based on population. You know, let's take probate judge just as an example only, not attacking them. I mean, my probate judge is there 8 hours a day, whether we have 500,000 people in the county or we have 50,000 people. Why does the probate judge in 500,000 county that works the same time probably sees the same amount of cases, you know? There might be additional assistance in other places. Why do they make twice as much?
I don't have a good accurate answer for that. I think there's generally considered there's more responsibility the larger the county, and I think that's been reflected in this general statute since it was first created, first enacted in 20 or so years ago. That's never really been questioned as to that the general concept that smaller, larger, there's a difference in the workload and the responsibility, how many people you supervise. In some cases, it's you have just one person or two people that work with. In other cases, you have a huge staff. So it's reflective of the general responsibilities that go along with being a larger county versus a smaller county. There may be some some questions about how much in this one versus that one, but part of that's one reason we're trying to get some uniformity here, so that there's some more logic to it than there has been in the past. I don't really have a really good answer except that general response that it's just more responsibility.
Any other questions, Mr. Grimmett? Anybody else in the?
Thanks, sir.
We got Andy. Okay. Pinky.
I think my comment has been handled already. I was going to simply address Representative Oliver's question having to do with whether judges and county officials who are under special legislation will be affected by this bill, and I don't think they would be. Historically, I have not been affected by it. I'm the Fulton County probate judge with special legislation that for my compensation, and historically I'm not affected by the minimum salary bills or the COLAs.
But my clerk, who I think a lot of, has a supplement by local legislation, and if it's handled, if there's local legislation out there, that local legislation is going to stay in place in addition to the current minimum salary. So if it's a supplement that's handled by local legislation, it will be in addition to this. I see you shaking your head no. You think I'm...
Is the supplement for an additional duty, or is it...
In this case, it is, I believe.
Okay, well, that's still...
My local legislation says that everything is included. In other words, they fix one flat amount, and it includes all of my courts.
So it's not yours is not drafted as a supplement. Yours is drafted as a straight pay. Any other questions of the committee? I've got a couple of things at the request of some people that I would like to offer. Any further discussion?
Has there been a motion to pass?
There has not been a motion to pass.
Okay. If there is a motion to pass, I'm going to offer an amendment.
Okay. I think. All right. Senate Bill 450, LC 282819S has been moved and seconded. Representative Oliver.
I have want to offer an amendment to clarify that it's not our intent to do, in effect, a double dipping of the COLAs for fiscal year '07. And I believe, Mr. Lanier, you were going to, I thought changing the date was the way to do it, but you offered an improved way to do it. Could you remind me what your suggestion is?
Honor's involved. I think the appropriate way is to go through and make those adjustments to the dates. I can give you those lines, or if you're ready this time, I can give you those lines, page numbers.
Please
Yes,
do.
sir.
Hey, the first one was here on page 2, line 19. We're changing the 2006 there to 2007, which would put it beyond the FY '07 budget. Similar change on page 4, line 31. Same change on line 9, page 6. Page 7, line 34. Page 11, line 8. And then I think it would probably be appropriate to change section 12 on page 12, so that it reads something more along the lines of it is the intent of the General Assembly that those county officials covered in this act whose minimum salaries are increased by operation of the law when the General Assembly authorizes a cost of living increase or general performance-based increase for the employees of the classified service and state merit system. Such county officials shall not receive any such increase authorized by the General Assembly in the fiscal year 2007 Appropriations Act, since such increase is covered in the minimum salary schedule under this act.
If
I
it,
think that would clarify the intent of the General Assembly that the raises for these particular groups are built into this act, and they will be eligible again starting with July 1, 2007 for each published General Assembly chooses to do it then by the way.
if it is acceptable to you, Mr. Chair, I wish to make an amendment as stated by Mr. Lanier. I think we understand what the intent is.
Is there any objection to waiving seeing that amendment in writing? I think without objection, I'll accept your motion. Do pass on that amendment. Is there a second on Representative Oliver's amendment? Amendment's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign.
No, he corrected it in a different way.
Any other, Chairman O'Neill?
The amendment, LC 28-281-9S offered by Mr. Grubiak, I would move we adopt this amendment. It should be on everybody's desk.
Second.
All right. The amendment has been properly moved and seconded. I'd like to move to amend the amendment. Which number are you working from?
I said LC 28-282-2819S.
Okay.
That's the base bill.
Because that's all there.
Oh, it is, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Need to be clarified on that.
This movie has two different amendments. You know, if you just try to think you're moving both up or just one or the other.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry,
just the
that-
LC number.
The one I,
the Senate
the
bill.
one I was moving, let me start over again. There's no, the amendment that begins by reading amend Senate Bill 450 on line 24, page 1 by inserting after the word county prior to July 1st in each such year, and that same language 3 more times. That's the one I was moving. It is not numbered, but it is, I think, on everybody's desk because I have one. So. You still second
All right.
that one?
I still, what's that? All right, let's refer to that as Amendment A. All right. So Chairman O'Neill, you've moved on Amendment A. I do believe there was a second and then some clarification. I would like to move to amend Amendment A by inserting before year in each of the 4 spots the words, would you rather have odd numbered or even numbered? Which one works better for you? So that it's done every other year, not every year, just for simplicity's sake.
That what would be done every other year?
The recalculation based on the census. When does DCA publish it?
You're saying doing it every 2 years?
Let's do even year. Prior to July 1 and such. Is that the proper wording?
Should be fine, Mr. Chairman. Prior to July 1 at each such even number.
It cuts it from it cuts it from every year to every other year, so that just from a recalculation standpoint. So each of these sentences would read prior to July 1 in each such even numbered year.
Mr. Chairman, since you've made a substitute amendment, if it's proper, I would withdraw my amendment.
I think I need to amend your amendment for us to be proper, though.
Okay.
I think. All right. So all those in favor of amending.
May I?
Sure.
I think in order to do what you want to do, which is to recalculate it every 2 years.
That's right.
I think we're probably going to need to go in this wording, and also, if you look at the wording as it's plugged in, let's look on page 1. The wording has provided, however, that such annual salary should be calculated in any year following the census year, which is for community care purposes of census. As for the county, we'll be adding prior to July 1 in such even number year. We probably ought to go up and insert it as well in line 23 and where it appears elsewhere in this bill in any even number year following the census in order to do what I think you want to do. And we can, that's a fairly innocuous thing to plug into it. I'm not sure that your amendment does exactly what you want it to do by plugging it only in that slot.
Could we ask for your advice as to how to accomplish this goal of doing this every other year, an even number of years rather than every year throughout the bill?
If we just plug it, the even word, even number of year into that other spot that I mentioned there, like line 23, where it says such annual salary should be calculated in any even number of year following a census year, and that language is replicated in each one of these 4 spots. If we just add that additional words there in addition to the words the chairman proposed, I think it does the trick.
Yes, sir.
Is the census calculated in even year, but results are in the odd?
That was my question. Do y'all know when DCA calculates the census?
It's every year.
Okay. Let's I'll just, is Amendment A worded correctly to do what it?
To do what Mr. Rouvier wants to do is worded correctly.
Okay.
To do what you want to do, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to make that one other additional amendment.
All right. Let me just withdraw my amendment to Amendment A. We'll just go with Amendment A as you originally proposed it, Chairman O'Neill. Sorry about the time. All right, Amendment A has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign.
Mr. Chairman, one last one, if I might.
Yes, sir.
And I guess we'll call it Amendment B, but it talks about amending Senate Bill 450 by deleting lines 32 and 33 on page 9, lines 1 through 4 on page 10, and inserting in lieu the following. I won't bore the committee by reading it, but obviously the purpose of this certainly appears to me to be to bring into the fold, so to speak, the various counties might have 2-year terms instead of 4, so that we treat everybody in the state equally, and that's been the, I guess, the genesis of the need for this bill to begin with. So, I would move that we adopt this as written. Hopefully it's on everyone's desk, or maybe refer to it as B.
All right.
Or B of the Gruby Act of amendments.
All right. We've got Amendment B has been properly moved by Chairman O'Neill. Is there a second? Second. All right. I'd like to move to amend Amendment B by striking the 5% and inserting 2.5%. in paragraph A and striking 2.5% and inserting 1.25%. And striking 7.5% and inserting 3.75%.
Second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right. Now, Amendment B, as amended, is moved and seconded. All those in favor of Amendment B, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Senator Kemp, basically what that did is it took the county commissioners to half of what was originally in the legislation. And then, as I'm sure everybody heard, the amendments offered would make it clear that the cost of living adjustments would only apply after the next fiscal year.
Mr. Chairman, will those be done as amendments, or would it be a committee substitute?
It will have to come out as a committee substitute.
Okay. I think that'd probably be a little cleaner anyway.
The proper motion. Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Oliver.
Ms. Buckner's motion to do pass is by committee substitute. Is that correct?
All right. It's been moved and seconded. SB 450 by committee substitute. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Mr. Chairman,
Motion
members of the
carries.
committee, thank you. Appreciate your time today.
We have one further piece of business, ladies and gentlemen. In your file, you'll have HR 1535, and I believe this one can be short and sweet. We added the language that we discussed in the last committee meeting. This would create the State Health Benefit Plan Design Team. Would be composed of a total of 19 persons. Speaker of the House of Representatives would appoint 3 members of the House, one of which would serve as chairperson. Speaker should appoint 2 full-time teachers, 1 person currently employed full-time as an employee of a state agency not otherwise represented on the plan design team, 1 person who is a retiree, and then the governor shall appoint 1 representative from DCH, Georgia Merit, State Health Benefit Plan Task Force, Department of Corrections, ex officio, Director of Georgia Forestry, Human Resource Officer currently employed by a State Department, a representative from the Judicial Branch, which I think was an excellent addition, 2 teachers, Human Resource Officer currently employed by Board of Education, and 1 person currently employed full-time as an employee for a state agency not otherwise represented on the plan design team, and 1 who is a retiree. A lot of different interest in the health care plan. Representative Oliver. HR 1535 has been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? By substitute. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. We're adjourned.